Spock knew his death was coming in Star Trek, and one heartbreaking moment proves he predicted it. When Leonard Nimoy's Spock sacrificed himself in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, it became one of the most unforgettable deaths in science fiction. Fans remember the haunting image of Spock trapped behind the radiation glass, calmly saying goodbye to Captain Kirk as he died from saving the Enterprise. What has kept the moment alive for decades, however, isn't just the power of Spock's sacrifice, it's the way it feels like Spock knew this ending was inevitable. Long before he actually entered the reactor chamber, Spock's words and actions in Wrath of Khan suggested that he had quietly accepted his fate. And one heartbreaking moment in particular proves that he predicted his death before it happened. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was classic Spock, logical, pragmatic, and yet profoundly loyal to his friends. His foreshadowing makes his death feel less like a shocking accident and more like the culmination of a life lived by one unshakable principle. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. Spock's calm before the storm. When the Wrath of Khan begins, the Enterprise isn't in the best shape. Its crew is aging, its engines are unreliable, and Captain Kirk himself is restless, struggling with middle age and his sense of irrelevance. Yet Spock seems unusually at peace. He has taken on the role of captain of the Enterprise in training exercises, commanding with his usual calm authority. More importantly, he shows signs of preparing Kirk for something he knows Kirk doesn't want to face: loss. Their early conversations are unusually weighted with mortality. Spock doesn't just talk like a teacher, he talks like someone trying to leave behind lessons that will matter after he's gone. His philosophy feels sharper, more reflective. And then comes the moment that makes his fate undeniable. There are always possibilities. Midway through the movie, Kirk and Spock share a quiet conversation about aging, duty, and friendship. Kirk, struggling with his birthday, admits he feels like life is passing him by. Spock, ever the anchor, reassures him. But his reassurance carries a chilling foreshadowing. Logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. It's not just an observation, it's a statement of intent. Spock doesn't say this as an abstract principle. He says it like a man who has already decided how he will act if a no-win scenario presents itself. The heartbreak is in Kirk's reply, where he attempts to lighten the moment, replying, "You are my superior officer. You are also my friend. I have been and always shall be yours." The way Nimoy delivers his side of this conversation suggests that Spock has already predicted the outcome of the coming battle. He knows that Khan will push them to the brink, that someone will need to make the ultimate sacrifice. And he knows, logically, that it must be him. This is the scene where Spock quietly tells Kirk and the audience that his death is not only possible, but expected. The Kobayashi Maru connection. Part of why this conversation lands so heavily is because of the Wrath of Khan's central theme, the Kobayashi Maru, the Starfleet Academy's infamous no-win scenario. The test is designed to teach cadets that sometimes there is no way to save everyone, that leadership comes with impossible choices. For Kirk, who famously cheated the test, the Kobayashi Maru has always been a metaphor for his refusal to accept death. He doesn't believe in no-win scenarios. For Spock, however, the Kobayashi Maru was never a test of cleverness. It was a test of character. And when the Enterprise is crippled by Khan's final attack, Spock sees that the crew is living through a real Kobayashi Maru. For Kirk, it's a devastating loss of control. For Spock, it's simply the moment he's been preparing for all along. His earlier line about the needs of the many proves that Spock entered this mission with eyes wide open. He knew that if the no-win scenario came, his path would be clear. He wouldn't find a way around it, as Kirk always had. He would face it head-on, accepting his death as the logical solution. Why Spock knew it had to be him. There's another layer to Spock's foresight, his sense of duty to Kirk himself. Throughout Wrath of Khan, Spock is deeply aware of Kirk's internal struggle. Kirk is a man who cannot handle death, not his own, and certainly not the deaths of those closest to him. As Spock puts it in a subtle yet devastating way earlier in the film, commanding a starship is your first best destiny. Anything else is a waste of material. Spock sees that Kirk's identity is tied to leadership, to his ability to protect his crew. And so, when the Enterprise faces destruction, Spock knows that Kirk cannot be the one to make the sacrifice. If Kirk dies, Starfleet loses its greatest captain. If another crew member dies, Kirk will be crushed under guilt. But if Spock dies, Kirk will survive, learn, and continue his destiny. This wasn't just logic, it was friendship in its purest form. Spock predicted his death not just as a mathematical possibility, but as an inevitability tied to who Kirk was as a person. He knew the only way forward for his captain and his crew was through his own sacrifice. The heartbreaking farewell. When the reactor room sequence arrives, everything that Spock foreshadowed pays off. He walks to his death with no hesitation, no fear, because he already accepted this outcome earlier. The audience has seen the prediction, we just didn't want to believe it until it happened. The moment behind the glass with Kirk becomes doubly heartbreaking when rewatched with this context. Spock tells Kirk, "I have been and always shall be your friend." These aren't just comforting words. They're a callback to the earlier scene, completing the circle. Spock predicted his own death, he prepared Kirk for it, and now he's carrying out the choice he promised he would make. For Kirk, the realization is devastating. This is the one scenario he could never cheat, the one death he could never prevent. For Spock, it's fulfillment of a decision he quietly made the moment Khan returned. Death, rebirth, and legacy. Of course, Spock's story doesn't end in Wrath of Khan. Thanks to the Genesis planet, his resurrection in Star Trek III, the search for Spock gave fans hope and kept the character alive for future films. Yet what makes his original death still resonate today is the sense of inevitability that surrounded it. Spock's prediction, his acceptance, and his dignity in the face of death transformed his sacrifice into something larger than a plot twist. It became a defining moment in the philosophy of Star Trek. The franchise has always been about exploration, about pushing forward into the unknown. Spock's death embodied that spirit, choosing the unknown of death for the certainty of saving lives. Even his resurrection didn't cheapen the moment. Instead, it reinforced the Kobayashi Maru lesson. Kirk did eventually cheat death by bringing Spock back, but it came at a cost: David Marcus's death, the loss of the Enterprise, and Kirk's own realization that there are always consequences. Spock's prediction still held true. There was no true victory, only trade-offs. Why the moment still hurts. What makes Spock's death and its foreshadowing so heartbreaking is that it strips away the illusion of surprise. The audience wasn't robbed of a character, they were invited into his choice. Spock told us, gently and logically, what he would do. He left breadcrumbs in conversations, in glances, in lines that at first sounded philosophical but later proved prophetic. This makes the moment uniquely powerful in Star Trek. Other characters in science fiction often die heroically but suddenly, caught in the chaos of war or chance. Spock's death is different.